Welcome to my channel. My name is Leslie, and today I will be reviewing my fictional reads from 2021. I have a large stack, so I'm going to try to talk about each book pretty quickly so that the video doesn't turn out to be, super long. So the first two books I'm going to talk about, I don't have the physical copy right now. One of them was a book that I loved so much that I lent it to a friend because I need someone else to read it so that I could talk to him about it. So I'm going to show you a photo. The first book is I can't even say it right. The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, a novel by Grady Hendrix. So there you go. Gosh, where do I start? This is a book that's okay, it's a vampire, so it's a supernatural fantasy type book. The main character is a mother, a former nurse. She lives in a like a sleepy little town that's a suburban town that's in South Carolina, I believe. This takes place in the 1980s. And so what happens with her character is that over the span of 5 years, she creates close friendships with a group of women in a book club. And what happens in that book club is that they start to read true crime, gritty novels, and they just really bond, have separate lives outside of their marriages, outside of their family responsibilities, community responsibilities. And so with that friendship, kind of bonding over time, really settling into this really peaceful life, there's this male figure that comes into their lives and really disrupts their community. And so what the character kind of finds out pretty early on, so it's not really like a spoiler or anything, is that something's up with this guy. And this character ends up being a vampire. But what I really enjoyed about this story is that I feel like the author is using the vampire, for lack of a better words, like the vampire trope, to explore topics of class issues, white privilege, white male privilege, and also how other communities that are not as better off as like the suburbs are lost in the mix and are neglected. Excuse me. And how this person who is a vampire, it really makes you question, why is it that this person really fits in like a glove to this community. And it really, there's an exploration between when, if you're in a situation where you're financially benefiting from a questionable character, are you really going to do the right thing? Are you really going to step in and try to intercede? Or are you going to be the type of person that looks the other way because you're benefiting from this problematic character? So, I mean, this story was written so well from the point of view of a female that I thought the author is female. I'm not familiar with this author's other work. I don't know anything about him. And I was shocked because one of my favorite pastimes during this pandemic, I mean, it's really exasperated. I enjoyed doing this before the pandemic, but more than ever, I love watching panel interviews or just one-on-one interviews with authors. So I went into watching an interview, had no clue that this author was male, and I was blown away because he really talks about, what do you call it? Gaslighting. He talks about gaslighting in a way that I've experienced, I've seen it played out on others, and the way that he implements it into the book really, I mean, I was so angry and frustrated because it was a bit triggering, but I think I found that the book that was so relatable made it so, yeah, made it like this juggernaut of a book that I could not put down. Um, there's some characters that I feel like, well, one character in particular that I felt like I mean, I wish there was a whole book about her because I felt like although her character was used in a way because um, to serve the purpose of like some of the points the author is trying to bring home. Her name is Miss Green. I don't want to give away too much, but her character is just like not is integral to the story, but I mean, she's just so like all the characters are richly written, but I think it's the fact that maybe it's like a testament to the writer and how he writes that his use of this character is like so well executed that I wanted more about her. But also, I think maybe I could be wrong, but maybe the author decided that wasn't going to be an avenue he was going to go down because he's a white male author, and the character I'm talking about, Mrs. Green, is black. So maybe he felt like it's not really his place to tell a story from her point of view. I don't know. That's kind of what I was thinking because I mean, when you read the book, I love her character. Um, I just feel like there's so much. I could just read a whole book about her. Her and the main character. I didn't really care for the other women. I don't think that they were. I don't know. I wasn't just drawn to them as much, and they got more time in the book. So I'll just say that. Let me see. My second book that I read was that I don't have. I don't have it on me, and I don't want to mess up some of the summary of it. So I'm going to go ahead and just tell you by the title. Um, This Green and Pleasant Land by Ayisha Malik. I'm sorry, I don't know if you can even see that. I'm going to read you a little bit of a summary description just because I read this a while ago and though I love it, I don't want to mess up the summary. So um, here's a description. It says, build them a mosque, Bela. Build them a mosque. For years, Bilal Hasham and his wife Miriam have lived contented, quiet lives in the sleepy rural village of Babel's End. Now all that is about to change. On her deathbed, Bilal's mother reaches for his hand. Instead of whispering her final prayers, she gives him a task: build a mosque in his country village. Miriam is horrified by Bilal's plans. His friends and neighbors are unnerved as outrage sweeps Babel's End. Battle lines are drawn. His mother's dying wish reveals deeper divisions in their village than Bilal had ever imagined. So I'll just leave it there. That book is incredible. All I'm going to say in addition is that I really enjoyed how the author explored how each person may have their ideologies, um, but and also might think that they are tolerant or accepting of others. You know, maybe necessarily in their mind, but when certain things come into actual applications, a person may find out that wow, I'm not as actually as tolerant as I thought I would, and I feel like that's what the book explores. That this Bilal is a person that loves a sleepy little town, but when I feel like he's just trying to do something that really makes him realize that he thought he belonged to this community, he felt that he did, but now that he's bringing up um, having a like proposing to the community for a mosque to be built, it seems like there's so much of an uproar. There's a hate crime that gets involved, and there has to be this reevaluation, of how he views his community, how they view themselves, um, and also there's this not just introspection, but how his decisions affect his family. And it was really that was another one that was a tearjerker. That one was like an emotional read. So, but I highly recommend it. It's a really beautiful tale, and I do feel not really content with the ending, but I think it's not a knock on the book. If anything, it's a compliment, because the book is written in a way that the author just really wants the reader to think about how they feel about these subjects. But it is hard to read people just actively going against something that I just feel like, wow, it's not even harming anybody, but it bothers other people so much. So something that's hard to read is how intolerant people, I guess, in the book realize they are. I don't know, but it's another really great read. All right, I don't want to make this video too long, and it's getting kind of long. So I'm going to quickly say I read quite a bit of poetry. And I'm not even going to review these very long. Also, I'm really bad at poetry. I'm not really good at understanding it. But these were all the authors that I just really love their work, even though someone like me does not. I'm missing one that I want to show you guys. Here it is. I have a giant stack. Oh, this might just be my favorite author last year, so we'll start with him. Night Sky with Exit Wounds by Ocean Vuong. The way that he writes, it's gonna sound meta and redundant, but he writes so poetically, so beautifully. It just you read his work and it just washes over you. It's so beautiful. And so on the back it says Ocean Vuong's first full-length collection aims straight for the perennial big and very human subject of romance, family, memory, grief, war, and melancholia. None of these he allows to overwhelm his spirit or his poems, which demonstrate through breath and cadence an unrepentant enthrallment that a gentle palm on the chest can calm the fiercest hungers. Everything this man writes is amazing. If you have the time, also look up some interviews that he has on YouTube. There's a great interview between him and the author Tommy Orange that's really beautiful. He just has a way of you really see his love of language, and also how his work is just permeated with love for his family, and all the things that family encompasses. It's really beautiful. I'm trying to keep short answers, but I keep blabbing. Okay. I also read She Had Some Horses, poems by Joy Harjo. I'll review this. Joy Harjo is an internationally renowned performer and writer of the Muscogee Creek Nation and was named United States Poet Laureate in 2019. The author of 8 books of poetry and a memoir, Crazy Brave. Her many honors include the Jackson Poetry Prize, the Ruth Lilly Prize. Oh, I should just, you know what? I'm kind of going on and on. Let me not tell you that. But, yes, so she's just a well-established poet. She's incredible. And I wish I could, poetry isn't something you can exactly, summarize. But I will review page 65 briefly, just so you have, a little taste of her poetry and her style. And page 65 is Drowning Horses. She says she is going to kill herself. I am 1,000 miles away, listening to her voice in an ocean of telephone sound, gray skies and nearly sundown. I don't ask her how. I am already familiar with the weapons. A restaurant that wouldn't serve her. The thinnest laughter, another drink. And even if I were closer to the cliff's edge of the talking wire, I would still be another mirror, another running horse. Her escape is my own. I tell her yes, yes. We ride out for breath over the distance. Night air approaches, the galloping other life. No sound, no sound. I love her. And I want to read all her other work. I don't think it's going to happen this year, but that's attached to my goals, which is I told myself that I would cut down on buying books because I went a little crazy during this pandemic. So, my goal is just to read whatever is in my apartment and stop buying. So we'll see how that goes. Okay. Every Day We Get More Illegal by Juan Felipe Herrera. Oh, after 2 years on the road as United States Poet Laureate, Juan Felipe Herrera reports back on his travels through contemporary America, poems written in the heat of witness and later in quiet moments of reflection, coalesce into an urgent, trenchant, and yet hopeful-filled portrait, the struggle and pain of those pushed to the edge, the injustices of our streets, the legal border game that separates and divides, and then a shift of register, a leap for peace and a view on to the possibility of unity. Another great read. I feel like this author is, he just writes in such a complex way, and I feel like I feel like a little dumb reading his work. I really do. But that says more about me than anything. So, but he has great work. He has other work out there that I haven't read yet, but it's pretty amazing. So, I also read. Oh, I love this author. This is a poet, Yesika Salgado, and I read Hermosa. She has a couple other books out. I want to say 3 or 4 that I haven't read yet. She's an LA author. What I love about her writing is she almost feels like someone I know. That's kind of like how she makes the reader feel. That's such a testament to her writing. She talks about things that are very personal. Mostly talks about her love life, but also talks about her life as a poet and what that means to her. Anytime I read her work, it's largely love life and just heartache and where you kind of go from there. So that's another great read. Now I have Postcolonial Love Poem by Natalie Diaz. She has another work out that I haven't read that came out before this. Oh, she had When My Brother Was an Aztec, which was a winner of an American Book Award, but I haven't read it yet. This was incredible. I think I could try and see if there's something that's somewhat quotable, just to give you a little taste of her work. America is a land of bad math and science. The right believes rapture will save them, and the violence they are delivering upon the earth and water. The left believes technology, the same technology wrecking the earth and water, will save them from the wreckage or help them build a new world on Mars. So she just has a lot of social political criticisms, as well as talking about the impact of modern day society on indigenous people. I love this read. I'm trying to think of all the poems. I think these 2 books are my favorite in the poetry category. They're just Actually, that's a lie. Plus, plus she has some horses. There's 3 of them. But yeah. This video is getting long. Okay. Here's a book that so many people probably read in middle grade. I'm trying to pick out all the middle grade books. I think I'm coming across those right now. Okay. Okay, so I read Animal Farm by George Orwell. It's one of those books that I kept saying, I'm going to read it, I'm going to read it, I'm going to read it, and I never got around to it. Finally read a copy. So this book is about the discontent of animals on a farm and how once the farmer, I think I remember, he passes away, they basically have a bit of like a coup, and they decide that they're going to self-govern. And what this really explores is how blind faith in political figures in government and how people appear to have your best interests at heart in the political sphere, but how that if you don't question things, if you don't challenge things, you could really set yourself up to really be harmed. So I mean it's a political fable, and there's so many things that have already been written about this or said about this. So I don't want to say too much, but I am glad I read it finally. And there's a character in here who I told myself I don't want this character to have a unhappy ending, and they did. I mean, the whole book is an unhappy ending, and a comment on politics. There's so many conversations we have about this, but it basically just it made me sad. But it's another great read. It's very short. It's not very long. So if it's a book that you know about but you just never picked up, pick it up. It's really good. This author is incredible. This story is about a young girl who, unbeknownst to her, she doesn't know how it happens, but a monster comes out through a picture, and this character is told by what she thinks may be a monster that there's another monster out there, and that this entity has to stop this monster. Well, the young girl decides that she believes this creature and that she's going to help, but really she the whole time she's not sure. And so this is a great book that explores what happens when we don't talk about the past, but also when we don't educate children on what to look out for in terms of abuse or just sensitive subjects that we think that we don't need to tell our kids. But then if we don't tell our kids, how are they going to know how to speak to us as parents if something's going on? So that's kind of like the gist of it. I don't think I'm really doing a great job or this book justice. This book is so good. This moved me so much. This is definitely a book that was an emotional read for me because I just felt like so much love and like almost wanted to protect. I just wanted to protect the children of the book, basically, and so that's how it makes you feel. And anyways, I enjoyed it. So the next book I read is This Time Will Be Different, and it's by Misa Sugiura. And this is probably like a middle to high school grade book. What can I say about this? The character is Japanese American, and where do I start? There's a lot of conversations that go on, and it's also very much about like generational trauma. So it's exploring generational trauma in terms of the Japanese American encampments in America and how this affected her family and how some of the decisions for the character today made by her mother, her aunt, and her school are all related to that. And I really appreciated the challenges the character went through. And although it's this heavy subject matter, it really teaches kids through this character's difficulty about learning to communicate amongst friends, and sometimes someone's perception of what's going on could be different to somebody else, and actually just hashing out and having those conversations, really just a lack of communication can really create issues, and it could also be resolved with communication. So I really loved it. I didn't like the mom in the story. I was so infuriated with the mom, but I appreciate the way that the author wrote the mother, because I felt like I don't hate the mom or anything like that. I feel like I understand her reasoning behind the things that she does, but I just felt like the mom could be infuriating. But I think maybe it's because I'm reading this book through the lens of the daughter. I don't know. Let me know what you think about that. One of the most surprising reads of 2021 that I thoroughly enjoyed was Pug Actually by Matt Dunn. This is a romance, a romance novel. I don't like romance. I tried reading like historic romance. I tried reading just other kinds of romance that I thought might get me to that genre. I don't like it. But Pug actually got me. And I think the story got me because the story is told through the lens of the dog. So you're reading the whole story through a pug, and it's so funny and it's so sweet. I did find myself feeling judgmental towards the main character, and by the end I just realized that I applaud the writer, because I think that I'm judging her, but that's because the way that the writer wrote the story was it's like setting me up to not know all the details, to make me infuriated her, and also just to question, why am I judging the character, you know? So it's about a woman who's in a relationship with someone that's clearly not good for her, and Doug the pug feels like he needs to finally just step in and set up his his owner with somebody, and hilarity ensues. So it's really good. If you're looking for a good laugh and you're not a big fan of romance, I'd say pick it up, because they'll definitely get you into that genre. All right. Let me go from here. The next book is Johnny Appleseed, but by Joshua Whitehead. This was the 2021 winner of Canada Reads. That's actually how I found out about it. I was watching the Canada Reads candidate. It's on CBC or something like that. And I couldn't help myself. I picked up the copy. Actually, I picked up 2 books that were on Canada Reads list. I'll look for the other one. It's coming up. So I'm going to read you the back. It says, off the res and trying to find ways to live, love, and survive in the big city, Johnny has 1 week before he must return to his home and his former life to attend the funeral of his stepfather. The 7 days that follow are like a fever dream, stories of love, trauma, sex, kinship, ambition, and heartbreaking recollections of his beloved Kokum grandmother. Johnny's life is a series of breakage, appendages, and linkages. And as he goes through the motion of preparing to return home, he learns how to put together the pieces of his life. What I see about this, what I'd like to say about this work is there are a couple of books that I read in 2021 that do similar, how do I say it, devices to establish a narrative. This is one of them. This is like the first one where this is a non-linear narrative, and so it's kind of told in this circular way of going from present to past to middle and everything in between. And the author very actively chooses to not have plot, to let go of plot in service of character. And so I could say that for about a couple of other books that I'm going to bring up next. So if that's something that you're interested in, this is very much character driven. I appreciated the conversations that the author is having about identity and, you know, what's projected onto the one person, how that other person will perceive you, and then how does that affect how you perceive yourself. This is pretty, this also talks about sex work, so just kind of a little bit of a warning there. But, I mean, those subjects are so important because he also talks about, in the book, how he's, like, fetishized, and he just writes it in a way that I've never really come across before, and I appreciated that dialogue. So, another great read. Let me see. I'm going to pick out other books that are in a similar vein in terms of how the narrative continues on. Let me see. I don't want to drop anything. I have two other books like that. Alright, my next book is Butter, Honey, Pig Bread by Frencesca Ekwuyasi. You know what? She has a very funny Instagram at times, so you might want to check it out. She was also, this was a runner-up to Joshua Whitehead's book, Jonny Appleseed. So it was nominated, it was like one of the, contestants for the 2021 Canada Reads. So it was like runner-up. This book it's also doing a similar technique of having a story in a non-linear fashion, very character-driven. This story is very, it's told at a very slow pace. So if you don't like a slow-paced book, you're not going to like this. But I will say that the slow pace is, it's earned. So, you know, I found myself getting teary-eyed because I was reading this book. I started out, and I'm not a big fan of slow-paced books, but when I read it, so much, again, is reading about the characters and their lives and how that past affected them, and you don't even know what happened in the past. You just know that it affected each character. And it's definitely, there's a lot of, like, meditation. There's a lot of characters cooking food, eating food, and I feel like the culinary exploration is very much a part of the narrative. So this story, oh gosh, I wonder if it has a summary. It says, here we go. Believing herself to be an Abanji, a spirit that plagues a family with grief by dying repeatedly in childhood and being reborn, Cabernaci fears the consequences of her defiant decisions to stay alive. Her worst fears come true when Cabernaci experiences a devastating childhood trauma that fractures the family in seemingly irreversible ways. Kahindi moves away to Montreal to heal and build a life of her own. That's Cabernaci's daughter. Tay flees to London and attempts to numb her guilt and loneliness with reckless hedonism. So both the daughters are twins, and they kind of go off into their separate lives. And so there's just this fracture between actually the three of them. And you just kind of wonder, how can they ever repair? How could they even begin to repair their lives? But even though they're all disconnected physically, I felt very much like spiritually they're still connected. There are just some things that happen in this book that, yeah, I guess that's the only word I can think of. It's very spiritual at times. I loved it. I enjoyed it. Again, it's a very slow paced read, so I'm just warning you. But I felt like it was warranted. I'd have to say my favorite book last year is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. I love this book so much. It's so poetic. It's so. The author is just like this master of words, and I feel like he contributes it. I can't even talk. To being bilingual, being someone that knows the Vietnamese language and also knows English, and how I saw a talk with him, how he talks about the sounds, the inflections of the Vietnamese language, and how that informs his work written in English. So this book is about a young man writing a letter to his mother, knowing that his mother's never going to read it because she's unable to read English, and I think that sets up a precedent for him to tell a story that's so vulnerable and so raw and beautiful. It's almost feels like it feels very confessional, and so he explores childhood abuse, his sexuality, drug addiction, and it's told also very much like Butter, Honey, Pig Bread, and Johnny Appleseed. It's told in a very non-linear, circular fashion. So you're kind of going in and out. But I kind of felt like this one was like the most effective in terms on it's written in such a poetic way. You feel like you're on this ride, and you feel like there is no confusion with when he jumps to different timelines. You're right on. You totally, completely pick up where he's going. You're like time traveling along with him, and there really is. It's so clear. There's no confusion about where am I in the story? He's a master wordsmith. So I love him. He was a favorite of 2021. The author. Let me see. I don't really want to talk about that book yet. Let me see. So this is another favorite, but it wasn't my most favorite. My favorite was On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. Okay. The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society by Mary Ann Shaffer and Annie Burroughs. I saw the movie before reading this. I love the movie and I love the book just as much. And I think that the adaptation did a great job of, getting rid of characters. Not that they're not unnecessary in the book, but just to function and so that people could follow along in a movie format. That was done beautifully. This book really is another book that really has a lot of love in it, covering a time period where there's a lot of pain, and it's like how do you even begin to talk about that? How do you look back at a hard time, and like how do you make sense of it all? And so I mean, this is beautiful. If I could find you, I'll read this too. January 1946. Writer Juliet Ashton receives a letter from a stranger, a founding member of the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, and so begins a remarkable tale of the island of Guernsey during the German occupation, and of a society as extraordinary as its name. So yes, this talks about Nazi Germany occupied Guernsey, which is off the Channel Island, I believe. And, you know, there's just still not a lot of a light shed on the occupation of that island. And so I appreciated that the story in the way it was told. Again, there's just a lot of love there. There is a love story in this book, but what I like is that the love story doesn't take center stage in the book. It's almost like it's like in the periphery. I appreciate it because I don't think I would have appreciated the book if it was just purely a love story. That wouldn't really do it for me. I think it's just the love of the characters and of the community and rallying around each other and trying to get through these really tough times that really touched me. So this is a really beautiful read. If you like historical fiction, I'd say pick this up. Let me see. Oh man, I'll talk about these two first. I'll briefly talk about Afterparties, which is a collection of short stories by Anthony Visnaso. This was released post-humanist. How I'm saying that? The author passed away, basically, and so the author's Cambodian American. So all the stories are short stories in here, and they talk from the point of view. I'm trying to think of all the characters. That's not really true. Every single character that's a protagonist in their own story is Cambodian American. And so every single story is different because every single person's experience in life is different. And so, you know, no culture is a monolith. And so I appreciated the exploration and there are just some really touching stories in here, and they're just so different. Meaning each character is just so different from each other, and I appreciated that. You know, sometimes I think it's more guilty in film than any other place, where in movies when you do see someone that's not white, it's always just like you could tell when someone can't see someone past their race or their culture, and then it's like it's worse when you see like the same stereotypes keep taking place, and it's just such a bad display of representation when people don't really get to, when they do get to see themselves, which is so rare, but then when you could see that it was handled so badly because people behind the scenes weren't even a part of that character's culture, I guess. I don't know if I'm trying to give an example, but in this story, it just felt like a rare, and I appreciate being able to experience someone really telling their own stories and like representing like a whole bunch of different people. And the first story, I don't want to slog on and on, but the first short story, which I think is like my favorite, is called Three Women of Chuck's Donuts. And that story talks about a mother and her two kids while they run a donut shop, and it explores identity, it explores a fractured family, and how do you move on from that? That's kind of like the short version, so I'll only just say that, but if you can, please read this. It's so good. You know what? Another like great surprising read of 2021, and I want to read all his other work, and he has plenty of work, so I don't know how I'm going to catch up because this author writes very quickly. It is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. I never heard of this author before, and when I picked up his work, there's a couple of things. I never heard of this author before, and it's in the horror genre. I'm not a big horror fan. I'm not a big thriller fan. Specifically horror. I'm not interested. I don't want to read about people being chopped up and stuff. It's just, times are tough enough. That's not what I want to read. But this book was so good. This book felt like, I feel like if you're not a horror fan, you'll enjoy this. And if you are a horror fan, then you're really going to enjoy this, because what this book does, it's it's the author's own original work, but it's so much of a nod to all these other authors that have defined the horror genre. This is another book where I love the work so much that I went out and started watching a bunch of different interviews with the author. And if I could find one that I feel is apropos to this book, I will I'll link it below, because he pointed something out, and I felt like once he said it, I was like really blown away, and I'm not that smart as this man is to like be able to break down a book in the way that he did. I mean, it's his work, but he had said in an interview how, like 1/3 of the book is a haunted house type story, then like the second portion, of the book is a slasher, and then the last third is like a monster. So he kind of took all these different, I'll say, horror devices, or tropes, and then thought like, hey, this is how I'm going to tackle each section of the book. And once he said that blew my mind, because it made perfect sense. And this is another one I don't want to misrepresent him. So let me read this to you. Alright, so I'll just read you this. I was going to read about the author, but instead I'll read about the story. And it says, The Only Good Indians follows 4 American Indian men. After a disturbing event from their youth puts them in a desperate struggle for their lives, tracked by an entity bent on retribution, these childhood friends are helpless as the culture and and traditions they left behind catch up to them in a violent, vengeful way. Read this. It's so good. Anyways, let me keep going. This video's been so long. Alright, I'll read this one. The next book is Frankenstein in Baghdad by Ahmed Sadawi. This is a translated work. Even though it's called Frankenstein in Baghdad, it's not an adaptation or an interpretation of Frankenstein. So if you pick up the book and think that that's what you're going to get, that's not it at all. I felt like the author was using he's using Frankenstein in a way to say something specific, but then kind of jump it off from there and make it all his own, and I appreciated it. I'm not a big fan of reinterpretations of classic novels. I get really bored, and I feel like I already know what's going to happen, and very rarely does another author of modern times say anything new and fresh of something that the classic didn't already do. And I feel like if a book is a classic, it's a classic for a reason. Don't mess it up. So this is what I appreciated about this author. And so this book says, from the rubble-strewn streets of U.S.-occupied Baghdad, Paddy, a scavenger and an oddball fixture at a local cafe, collects human body parts and stitches them together to create a corpse. His goal, he claims, is for the government to recognize the parts as people and to give them proper burial. But when the corpse goes missing, a wave of eerie murders sweeps the city. Haiti soon realizes he has created a monster, one that needs human flesh to survive, first from the guilty and then from anyone in its path. With white-knuckle horror and black humor, Frankenstein in Baghdad captures the surreal reality of contemporary Iraq. I feel like there's so much that I don't know about the history of what's going on in Iraq, and so don't let that shy you away from reading this book. I feel like it made me want to learn more. outside of reading this book, but also I didn't need to know a lot going into reading it. I felt like so much of what he's talking about, even though it's so specific to those issues, I love authors that write so specific, because it's fine. I don't need to pick a book and read about something that I can relate to or understand. I just like to hear someone's completely different perspective, someone else's world. I love it. And so what I really love about that book is really that's what he does here. And I wish I could pick a quote that will kind of put it together. I don't think I'll be able to right now though. But anyways, what I like about this book is I kind of felt like, although that's a premise is like, and Dr. Frankenstein and the monster is kind of like the premise, but what happens is, what the author is really trying to say is, I kind of felt like the monster is war, and, or no, I kind of feel like, yeah, I kind of feel like it's war is like the monster of the story, and this is about people just trying to like pick up their lives, I guess. I don't know. I don't think I'm really doing it justice, but I just think the title is so much more symbolic, and there's just so much more going on in it. So another great read. If you like translated fiction, this is a good one. All right. So the next book I'm going to read is Winter Counts by David Heska Wanbli Whedon. This is a like a fictional crime novel. I read this so quickly, and I'm a slow reader, but this book was so good. I couldn't put it down. I didn't sleep. That's all I wanted to do was read this book. So I'll read you the back, and it says, Virgil Wounded Horse is a local enforcer on the Rosebud Indian Reservation in South Dakota. When justice is denied by the American legal system or the tribal council, Virgil is hired to deliver his own punishment, the kind that's hard to forget. But when heroin makes its way onto the reservation and finds Virgil's nephew, his vigilantism suddenly becomes personal. He enlists the help of his ex-girlfriend and sets out to learn where the drugs are coming from and how to make them stop. David Heska Wanbli Whedon is an enrolled citizen of the Sikangu Lakota Nation and received his MFA from the Institute of American Indian Arts. A lawyer and a professor, he lives in Denver, Colorado with his family. There's another great interview with the author talking about this book. I'll link it below. What I didn't know when I read this book, I mean, I'm reading a piece of fiction, so I don't know enough. So, in the interview with the author, he talks about how, in real life, the fact that there is just not enough support on reservations, from government, police. There's not enough support. Missing, murdered Indigenous women is an issue. We're not keeping track of statistics. We're not keeping. There's no support. It's what I'm getting at. So when there's not enough support for a community to thrive, that actually is a contributing factor to have a need for vigilantes, because there's no one helping. And so this is something that is a real issue and does happen in real life. I just wasn't aware. And I appreciate the story being told through that character, the main character. Virgil is a person that, in certain parts of his life, he feels like there are just certain parts of his culture that he doesn't really connect to. And so in the story, you get to also see the evolution of this person reconnecting with parts of his culture that he didn't really, I I don't know, in some ways I felt like the character turned his up his nose to. Uh, and although we largely see the story from Virgil's point of view, I enjoyed that. I mean, there's this whole other story of his ex-girlfriend, and even though you could easily say that that other story is secondary and unimportant, I felt like it was so important. Even though they're just portions of this book that have nothing to do with, let's say, um, the issue that's trying to, like the crime that's trying to be solved. There are so many other really just important conversations that were going on in this book that I appreciated. And I just don't want to say too much about it. It's better to read it than anything. But if you like crime novels, pick this up. The author has already said that he's going to create a sequel, and that wasn't necessarily intended. It was going to be a one-off book, but I just think the story has done so well, and he has so much more to say, and I cannot wait. If he makes this into like a giant series, 20 books deep of just following this character, I'll be on that ride with him, because I love the character. I love the conversation that they're having in this book, and I don't want to say too much about it, but it's worth a read. Alright, my last two books I'm going to talk about are from the same author, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you they're both from Charles Yu. The first one is Interior Chinatown, and the second one is How to Live Safely in a Science Fiction Universe. Excuse me. I'm trying to think about where to start. Interior Chinatown won the award for the National Book Award. I don't know which year. And this book is told in a very non-traditional way. This book is told in a script form, and actually both these books are told in a way that I've never read before, which is a meta experience. So I'll talk a little more about that. This book is in script form. The main character, I'll say, is Willis Wu, doesn't perceive himself as a protagonist in his own life. He's merely generic Asian man. Sometimes he gets to be background oriental, making a weird face or even disgraced son, but always he is relegated to a prop. Yet every day he leaves his tiny room in a Chinatown SRO and enters a Golden Palace restaurant where Black and White, a procedural cop show, is in perpetual production. He's a bit player here too, but he dreams of being Kung Fu Guy, the most respected role that anyone who looks like him can attain. Or is it? So this kind of, it explores, I'm trying to make sure I say this right, it explores stereotypes being told on screen. Not just like in movies, but on television. And how this character, like the summary says, is just a side character, and he has this goal of being the leading man, and how he just feels like he's never going to get there, because the reality, even though this is fictional, the reality is, it so rarely exists for a character, person of color, to break out of stereotypes or to be the main character. And so the author really explores this, but I feel like the whole time you're reading it in script form. So even when you're reading Willis Wu outside of his work, his job, even when he's in his home life, it's still like this mix of reading his life in script form, but also, the author did something really creative where it's like he'll touch a piece of fruit, but then you realize that piece of fruit isn't real. And I just thought that really blew me away. And what is he trying to say with that? And, he's living this life, but then it's a stage. And, like, what is it going to take, and what sacrifices are you going to have to make to even reach any type of level of success? It's I love this book. I'm glad it won the National Book Award. So his other book I read last year because I loved his work so much was How to Live Safely in a Science Fiction Universe by Charles Yu. I think I already said that. And it says, every day in Minor Universe 31, people get into time machines and try to change the past. That's where Charles Yu, time travel technician, steps in. He helps save people from themselves, literally. When he's not taking clients' calls, Yu visits his mother and searches for his father, who invented time travel and then vanished. The key to locating his father may be found in a book. It's called How to Live Safely in a Science Fiction Universe, and somewhere inside it is information that will help him. It may even save his life. This book is also, I'm trying to remember, I felt like he was doing a similar technique of creating a meta experience of how his character informs himself. I don't think I'm going to do any justice as well, but what I really love about this book is, although he's talking about time travel, I almost feel like he's also talking about not generational trauma, but how, like, in families you could create cycles, and how do you break that cycle? And there's another interesting point I feel like he's making in the book, but let me know your interpretation of it. People in this world time travel, and they could put themselves like in a loop of a certain memory, and so the mom character decides to live in a way where she's just experiencing the old version that she liked of her husband. And I thought, gosh, that's so I really want to know more about what the author was trying to say with that. I kind of felt like the author was saying, you know, sometimes it's like, you have to accept the whole person and not just like a little sliver of a person, like this little idealized version that you love. People are just way more complex, and I feel like you can love more, you can love big if you love the entire person. And I think it's really telling of the mom to just want to do that to herself, to not really live her life, but to kind of live one in observation of a moment just because she cherished that moment so much. I just felt like that's not really living, and that's a lot of what goes on in this world. And it also has a lot of humor. There's this AI type figure that the main character is in love with, and that even though it's AI, it deals with mental health issues, and but it's done in a way that's like it's funny, and I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of like explaining it in this two-dimensional way, but I feel like it's something that the character has to deal with, and again, I think it kind of touches upon loving someone for who they are, not like these little pieces of them. That's what really stuck out to me about this book. I've talked for too long, so I'm gonna stop there, and I'm gonna create a separate video talking about the books that I wasn't really fond of for 2021. If you watched this entire thing, thank you. It turned out way too long. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you later.